think today I want to do a little bit of UI. Maybe edit the scripts a bit. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I just went online. I just looked for some free icons. And I looked for something for research. I went with a microscope, and this is the icon I found. Just searching around online. So I'm going to be using this. Obviously, it's going to need to be a lot smaller if I'm going to use it in UI. I think I'm just going to put have a bar going across the top, and we'll have our icon here. Alright, so we have our icon here, and then we'll have our text beside it, which will either be just the number or it'll say research, and then the number will probably just have the number, just so it's a little cleaner. Because looking at the icon, it should indicate to the player what it is. If it doesn't, then it's probably a bad icon. And microscope, you kind of think science or research immediately. So that's why I went with, or why I'm going to go with a microscope for my icon. And I've got color in here because I'm going to go with a black, probably partially transparent bar going across the top for my UI. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that out of my scene. And none of this is going to be affected when it comes to our animation player, because remember, our animation player is only changing the item box itself. So I come in here and say I grab a color ret, slap it across, drag it over. All right, we'll just go solid black, and if I run it, when I hit tab to bring that up for us, we can see that the UI across the top won't be affected. So that's one instance where the tree structure is gonna matter a bit when it comes to your UI. Color ret, yes. So I'm gonna go like this. I'm gonna call this UI info, top info. Let's go with top bar BG for background. This is going to be more transparent. We can click around maybe halfway or so. It's probably good. I'm going to bring this icon in just so I can take a look at it on top. Doesn't have to be exact just in terms of size. I'll bring this in, I'll take a look. And looks like there we go. So do I think that's going to stand out when I run this? Let's take a look. Yeah, I think that stands out enough. I don't think I need to darken the background at all for that. So it's fine. Let's get an idea of what size is this that we're working with. 068. Okay. So since this is an SVG that I got, I'm going to go ahead and just have it selected down here in my file system. And go up to the import tab. And I'm going to have to click on it again. And if I can locate it, pretty sure there was a scale. There it is, right there, 0.068, and I'll hit re-import. Now when I bring it in, it'll already be the perfect size for us. All right. So how do we want to go about this? How many things are we going to have up top? Unknown. So what I would want here is an H box on top. All right, going across. I'm going to go ahead and set that. Actually, before I set that, I'll go to my anchors up top and set it to top wide. And bring it down. Now you can come in, you can be as rough or as exact as you want. And this will be our We don't want it inside of the color rect, do we? This H box is just going to hold all of our elements, but it's going to keep things equally spaced going across. So I can now come in here and add a texture rect, which I usually use for my icons and that. Then I can come in and add a label for the text, right? And then we can come in, right? However many you're gonna have as your maximum, I have no idea. And we could take a look at that. I'm just wondering if I really want to have that as the H-box as a child of the color rect, which I suppose I do. I do want to pull that away from the edge. You don't want to have it right up against the edge of your window, which obviously we have here. So the H-box is going to have to come in a little bit. In a bit. Probably should have checked on there, and I can get that with the H-box selected by going to Layout, Transform. I can see it's at position 13, so it's 13 short of the max here. So if I go to the end here and I take a look, I can just go to size and do 1139, which is what I have here, minus 13, and hit enter. And now it's exactly 13 pixels away from each side. Now for the top there, we could probably just increase the color rect a little bit, just to give us that bit of space from the top and bottom, like so. All right, now when we zoom out and we run it, that should look nicer. Should be nicer to look at here. There we go. And of course, depending on your icon, you could always maybe even go smaller than that. For H-box container, what do I want to call this one? This is going to be so we already have top bar background. I guess this would just be top bar, and that's kind of weird. The bar is a child of the background, but that's going to be whatever, I suppose. And I'm going to go ahead and set the texture rect and just call it point icon, just because I might want to use it later. And point label. And I think I'm going to stick both of these, the icon and the label, inside of their own H-box. And the reason I'm going to do that is this way I can space these out on their own. But as well, if I go ahead and add a new item in here, for example, if I came in, I grabbed another texture rect, right? I give it a texture. I don't necessarily want them to be this close, which would, one, give me the option to put a spacer in there if I wanted, as well as not have duplicate names going through and keeping things just a little cleaner. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in and add an H-box container and put my icon and the label inside of it, and put that before the texture. There we go. So now we can see this, my icon and label is one item for us. So I'm just going to call this my UI item container. Right, because this container is now holding the UI or elements of this item, which in this case is going to be the research. And now, depending on the icon, how close everything is, I can always come in here and tweak the separation on a per object basis. So at 0, it's probably fine, but I would prefer a bit of space just in general. So I'm going to go with 10, take a look at how that looks like on my screen when it's running. And I think 10 is fine. 5 I could probably get away with as well. Alright, so we have that going. And now we need information. We need to update our UI with information, because when it's running, nothing's being displayed to us, right? But we already have, we can open this up, we can place research, and we had this printing out last time, I believe it is. There it is in the output. So we are gaining our points. So we just need to translate those points up into our UI. So what we're going to do is we could use a signal. I'm just wondering here, because we're going to go up to the singleton. If I take a look at that, it's going to be our global, which is just research points. We just take a look at our building. Point plus equal point gain. You know what? I think I can go ahead and we'll just create a function here. I'll say update UI points. And I'm thinking that we go in, we're obviously going to need to pass in a number. So I'll just call that P for now. It's going to be an integer. And what kind? What type of points? All right, so I'll say type, and that's going to be a string. Actually, that could work better as we used an enum. Let's see if I remember how to do these enums. So enum, and then it's just the curly braces. All right, so I'll go in here and I'll just go research, and then if there's any other points that you wanted to put in, right? Maybe military, you could put that in. I have no idea. Nothing's coming to mind here, but you can go in and you can always just add extra points in like that. This needs, or I should have a type here, right? So point type, I believe that's fine, and then we should be able to go var no, shouldn't need any of those. So we should be able to just come in here and put in for this, instead of a string, point type. There we go. So now when we pass this in, we can just pass in, right, global dot point. Oh no, because we don't have that. We need to actually create a type then. All right, so I was remembering that, right? So we are going to need it, even though we don't really need to change it. All right, so instead of wasting your time with that, I just went ahead and refreshed myself there for a moment. So yeah, so type, we're just going to pass point type in. So we're basically going to pass in one of these. These are going to come back as a number. Just the way they are, it's an integer, but we can also just check, well, I'll show you how we can do that, because we're actually going to do that. We're going to check with a match. So we're going to say match type. And this is either going to be a point type dot research. Is that not going to show up? I guess not. Pass. And the other type would be point type dot military in this case, and that's not going to autofill. And I'll put an extra space in there just to kind of clean that up a little, or space it out a bit. So there we go. So now based off the type that we put in, we could have one of, two things happen, right? So in this case, we're going to update those research points. So research points plus equals P. Change that to be a little clearer now. So we'll say point. And then from here, we can get our UI. So I'm going to go to my canvas layer inside of my tree, my scene tree. I'm going to rename it to UI, since we're now actually getting into putting some UI elements into it. And to show you how I'm going to grab a hold of this, if I were to run this, now this window here doesn't matter. What I want is I want to click on the remote section, and we can see here. So from global, we have to go up one to the root, and then we can come down to the node 2D and then UI. So I don't like calling mine node 2D. I'm just going to call it main. So from here, my global, I need to go up one to the root. So I can either get the root or just use get parent or do the double dot when getting the node. Doesn't really matter here. So I'm going to go ahead and do in this case, do I want to go with, yeah, this scene should never really disappear. Theory. If there is a situation, then we can decide on that later. So we'll say var UI. It's got to be a canvas layer. Side of ready, or whenever this gets set. You can set this later. For example, I could just call this inside of my main function if I wanted to, right? My main node. But here I'm going to go ahead and just set UI equals get node or null, and it's going to be 2 dots to signify get parent, and then we're going to come down main and UI. Right. And then just to put a little bit of safety measure in there, we'll say if UI equals null, print. In this case, I think I'm just going to go print error. We'll say UI not found. All right, and I'll show you what that would look like. So if we go ahead, and I'm going to change this to just change the name of it, and I run this, and we should see that error printed out in the console, UI not found, because we can't find that node, because obviously I renamed it. So if I change that back and rerun the project, we should not see that error. All right, fantastic. All right, so now how do we update when we're adding points to it? Well, we're going to take a look. Where's our research building? So instead, we no longer need to print this. And what we need to actually do is we're going to our global, and we'll do our update UI points. So we need the amount of points, which is points gained here. So that remains the same. And then next we had a type. No, I know there was a shortcut to fill that in. I guess it's not going to go there. So a second argument, and the next is going to be type, right? So, oops. So I can say global dot point type dot research, and that'll fill that in. And then if that is correct, that should come up to our global. We'll be calling our update UI points, passing the points, passing the type. The type should come back as point type dot research. From here, we'll add our points on to our research points variable, just like we were doing before. And instead of printing it out, we can now go into get a hold of our UI. So say if UI not equal null, then we'll go ahead and go UI, and we can call a function on it to update. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go to my UI script now, and I'm going to create a function, func update. I don't want to just call it update UI because later there might be things that make this name just not make sense, but for now I'm just gonna say update points or point display. The point display, and then again same thing here. We can go ahead and we could take a global dot. Point type. Can we not? There we go. So we could take a point type in, and that would at least narrow this function down to only be about points, in order for that to make sense. So I think I'm going to do that, and if that's the case, then we could also just copy match statement, because we'll essentially be doing the same thing, right? Copy global dot, there we go. Match pass and match type. We can actually just use the same name there, so type. And to keep it things a little consistent, we can go ahead and put the points in. So we'll just say amount, it's an integer, and then our type. All right, so match type. So if it's our research, then what we're going to do is we can get our research item. So now this is where you're going to have to decide, do you want to name your HBox container? The one that I've got currently enabled is UI item container. Or do you want to keep the name generic and keep track of it another way? Because here in the UI, it doesn't really matter all that much because you can always track which one that's going to be. And I think I'm going to do that with a variable. So I'm going to go ahead and export. And this is going to be, I'll call this research item. And that'll be in HBox container, right? We got to put the R at the beginning. HBox container. All right. So if I save that, I should now just be able to come in here and add my container in. Now, of course, if you don't want to export, you go ahead and just you can do your on ready, or you can just get the node at the time of needing it. Completely up to you. So it's going to be now the research item. So research item dot get child 0. That's the icon. So we want 1 for the label. And if you want to get cleaner with it, right, we can go there, this, and we can be like point label. It is a label type, and we set it to that child, and now we can get the label autofill. You can do that. There's nothing wrong if you really don't do that. If you don't declare the type and then store that in its own temporary variable. But if you want to do that, you can. So we'll say point label dot text equals, and we just call it points, right? No, we call it amount. The amount we're passing in. Now this obviously has to be a string. What I also want to do is string. Now, do I do it in here or is it exterior? Exterior. So say pad zeros. And how many digits? I'm gonna go with 4. Right, so I'm gonna go with 4, and that's gonna basically say that I can have a maximum of 9,999 research points. It's effectively what this is gonna say, because it's gonna pad out my number. So if I go ahead and show this, it'll probably make more sense. All right, so we have that temporary number that we put in there, which is obviously more than 4 padded. But I'm gonna go ahead. That's not actually gonna update because we're not calling it. My mistake there. So if we're gonna go back and review what we got here. So on the research building, on our timer timeout, we are now calling update UI points function on our global script, passing in points gain, and we're passing in a type of our points. So global.pointType.research. Inside of our globals, we are keeping track our UI, and we have an enum of point type that has research and military. In this case, I'm getting my UI on the ready, and if it's null, then I'm going to print out an error. And for update UI points, we take points as an argument, cast as an integer, and we're asking for a type, which is from our enum, a point type, and we're going to match that type that gets passed in. If it's a research type, which it is in our case, then we're going to add the points that was passed in. We're going to add that to our research points. And if our UI does not equal null, then we're going to access our UI, and we're going to call that update point display function. So before we go on that, so I'm going to say UI.update I'm going to copy and paste just to make sure that that's fine. So update point display, and remember that takes an amount first. So and that amount is going to be our research points, right? That new number that we have, and we're going to need a type. So again, we'll just go ahead and say point type dot research. All right. So now that we've passed in an amount and a type, when we ask that to happen, our UI is going to match the type and say, okay, it's a research type. So what it's going to do is it's going to get the label for the text, and then it's going to set that text to the amount that we passed in and pad it out with 4 zeros. All right, so now that it runs, this should work. I'll hit tab to open this up, place research building. I cannot call add child on null value. And why is that? I probably happened when I changed the name. Yes, because I changed it to node 2D. I'll change it to main now. And just fix that. Alright, so if we run it. Alright, camera and that moves around. Our UI's there. Tab to open this up. I'll grab a research building, place it, and you'll see the number up top there. Should update. So you see we have up to 4 digits in our placement. So that's showing that we can only have up to 9,999. If we cross over that, that's going to be kind of problematic. So we should actually put that in place, that 9,999 limit. All right. So first I'm going to go to my point label, and I'm just going to set these to just the 4 zeros, just so it makes sense. Side of what's our UI? No, it's going to be inside of our globals. All right. So we can go ahead and check. We'll say if research points. Actually, we don't have to do an if. We can actually just change this line and use a max. Actually, we want the min. So we'll say min, and inside of here we pass in two values, and it's going to take the smaller number of the two. This is going to be our research points plus points. Then the second argument is going to be our 9,999. And just for a tip, if this is a little hard to read when you're going past that 3 values, you can use an underscore to make it easier to read inside of GDScript. So just to show that, I'm going to go ahead and keep that. And with that, we don't need this line anymore. Research points plus equals points. We don't need that. We just need to set research points equal to that min function that we just used. So if 9,999 is the smaller number, then that's what research points will be set to. And if research points plus points is smaller than 9,999, then it's not going to go any more than that. And I can show you. So if I just leave it the way it is and run it, it should function exactly the same. It's going to go up to 4, and that's going to continue. Just like it did last time, visually to the player, nothing has changed. Alright, so what I'm going to do is inside my globals, I'm going to go ahead and set my research points here to 9,990. That way we only have to wait a couple seconds to see that play out. And we can see that play here once we place down a research building. I don't know why I was waiting, but there we go. There we go. 9,992, 94, 96, 98, and then we'll see it cap at 99. There it is, and you'll notice it's not going to go any higher than that. So there's how you can put a limit on that. So now we're displaying our points, as well as putting a hard cap on the amount that we can have. Now, obviously, if you're starting with an amount, then obviously in your ready function, you would need to load that data in or set that, but starting at 0 by default is fine. Yep, that'll be fine. I want to do it. Yeah, I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab this one line that we're using to update point display inside of our globals. And I'm just going to go up into my ready and add in else and just call that. That way it's automatically updated. So I can set this text to whatever I wanted and just spam some strings, characters in there. And that'll automatically update to be our 4 zeros when we start. That way my placeholder doesn't really matter. The only place that's going to matter is when we're actually looking at it here, and it makes no sense. So we got our 4 there, and there we go. We have this set up. You've heard my thoughts as we kind of went through that. And I'll go through one more time just to clarify what's going on. Now that we have that all set up. So starting with our research building. On timeout, instead of just adding points to the global research points variable, we're now going inside our global script and calling update UI points. And we're passing in the points gain value. And we're passing in a second argument, that is our point type, to tell it that we're updating the research points inside of globals. When we get that function, We're going to check that type, and if it's a research type, which in our case it is, then we're setting research points equal to the minimum, so the smaller number between the research points plus the new points, or 9,999. So whichever number is smaller is going to be set to our research points variable. And if UI is not equal to null, so if we had no problem getting that, assigning that variable earlier, then we're going to call update point display on our UI, pass in our research points and the type of research. And inside of our GUI, we do a similar thing. We check the type. If it's a research type, we get the point label and we set the text to a stringed version of the amount we passed in. And in my case, I'm padding it with 4 zeros. Alright, so there you go. We've gone ahead and added that bit of UI in. It's not crazy complicated. The only reason this video is much longer than it is just because we're kind of one, explaining it and talking it out, as well as, of course, thinking about it as we go on how we want to do it. So if we weren't going through all that, you could have easily set this up 5 minutes or so. Once you decide how you're going to go about doing that. Alright, just so this video doesn't get too long or go any longer than what it already has, I'll go ahead and stop that there. So take care, have yourselves a good one, and you're noticing the debugger. We have none of those errors. We just have parameters not being used, which I can go ahead and fix that. So let's put the underscore there and click on that error underscore there. And our debugger is completely clean. Alright, so I know for me, that bugs me and annoys me, so that might be bugging you. But with that, take care, have yourselves a good one. If you want to support the channel, the Patreon should be in the description. If not, it was on the screen in the beginning of the video, right after the intro. Should be in the description though, but take care, have yourselves a good one.